In today's video, I want to continue with the 60th Bishop of Jerusalem, John V, and also discuss some other contemporaries or other names such as John VI, Theodore, the 61st. And then I'll stop, and the next video in the future will be about Elias and so on. But as I look at these two officially recognized men and who were leaders in Jerusalem, I also want to read through my sort of summary or understanding of the history that revolved between these ages, like the year 706 to 735 and the year 745 to 770. Other sources say 760 to 782. And the reason I want to focus on this 8th century, or I'll, I want to expand how is Jerusalem affecting? What are the leaders of Jerusalem doing to Christians in Asia and Africa and Europe? How do other contemporaries, whether they themselves be Christian in the orthodox or official sense, or in the unorthodox or schismatic or erroneous, or um, within the Christian umbrella, and people outside of it, people who would later be called Muslims, or people who would be called iconoclast. Um, so this period of time is very polemical, and so I hope in this video today to show you, as I focus on these two, John and Theodore, I'll also share some other contemporaries. Um, but I wanted to first start with this Orthodox Wiki site, and then after that I'll go through Theodore. Uh, then after that I'll read something called Umar's Assurance. And then after that, read it a part of this Umar II, or some of his statements regarding taxes to Christians in Jerusalem. Um, and then that's in terms of like the rulers for the East. And then in terms of the Byzantine Empire or the Eastern Roman Empire, I'll read a little bit about Leo III and his iconoclasm. And also want to acknowledge that there are two other monks or two other groups that are not associated with the Orthodox Church. Here you can see, beginning with Abraham and then Krikor. In this time period, we have three: Kevork, and Megurdic, and Johannes, between the same time period as John V and Theodore for the Armenian diocese in Jerusalem. And then for the other one, the list of bishops for the Syriac, which was at the time called the Jacobite Church, or the non-Chalcedonian Church. You have possibly Jeremy, Thomas, and John as acting bishops or representing their diocese of Antioch here in Jerusalem. There aren't any dates known, so I just have to guess that it's these three that are highlighted. Um, so let's start first with what's going on in Antioch. You have Macarius, who was a monothelite, believed in a single will. This was known as a heresy. Theophanes, Sebastian, leading up to Stephen, either the third or Stephen the fourth, depending on the whose historical account you're following, and Theophylact. So these are contemporaries. These are Stephen and Theophylact are contemporaries of John and Theodore. During the same time period, there was no Jewish priesthood. The priesthood, in terms of the temple in Jerusalem, had ceased in the year 70 AD. And then, in general, people who were ethnically associated with the people of Judah were no longer allowed to enter Jerusalem because in the year 135, there had been a siege, there had been a war, and there had been a destruction. And as a result of that 135 year, the Roman Empire, which at the time was a secular empire or a pagan empire, did not allow Jews to return to Jerusalem. As part of that conquest, they also renamed the city to Alina Capitolina. So as I read today, you'll still see a reference to Alina. But in terms of the time period in the 7th century, this is when the Babylonian Talmud, or the northern version of commentaries and the rabbinical um, expositions of the what's called rabbinical Judaism, is getting completed. So there's a new understanding in the Jewish religion. So basically, this is not First Temple Judaism. It is not Second Temple Judaism. It is not prophetic in the sense of like the Ebionites, or the monks or the type of people that wrote various writings in terms of temple worship and eschatology. But it isn't near completion. So this is around the same time that the Bible is also getting completed from a Christian perspective in terms of the Old and New Testament scripts, list, table of contents, if you will. And then in Constantinople, you have George, Paul III, Callinicus, Cyrus, John V. John the Sixth and Germanus would have been contemporaries of the patriarchs of Jerusalem that I'm focusing on in this video. And then my patron saint, Isaac the Syrian, also known as the Bishop of Nineveh. Uh, he was a he had just finished, or probably passed away around the year 700. But another contemporary is John of Damascus, and he'll be referenced um, by the Patriarch of Jerusalem. And Peter, Bishop of Damascus, uh, also not orthodox but recognized as the Book of Union, Hymn of Praise on the Life of Excellency by Babai the Great, uh, where I found interesting that this was a Christology presented that was different than the Diophysite Christology, or Miaphysite Christology. So interesting to look at into this on the life of Excellency by Babai the Great, and also in the same time period. Oh, sorry, a few decades before Maximus the Confessor and John of Nicaea have been influential in the East. For the Church of the East, from Persia towards India, you have in the years 693 and forward, Johanan the Leper, Sliba Ska, Pethion, Abba II, and Cyrene. And then for the Coptic, you have Benjamin, Agathon, John III, Isaac, Simeon, Alexander, Cosmas, and Theodore. So you have two people. There's a Theodore in Alexandria, there's a Theodore in Jerusalem. Uh, were these people in contact with each other? I don't think that's mentioned in the readings I'll be doing today. Um, and then in Rome, you have uh, John the Sixth, John the Seventh, Sisinus, Constantine, Saint Gregory, who condemned iconoclasm, uh, Gregory II, Gregory III, and then the last Orthodox Pope, or the last recognized saint in the Western Diocese, Saint Zacharias from 741, 752, who would then later be succeeded by Pope Stephen II. Um, and then after this, we have in other Western lands, kind of how I had this for the Eastern lands, people who were influential and made a big deal in various dioceses. In the East, you also have in the West, in the 7th century, Cuthbert of Lindisfarne, Venerable Bede, who wrote the Ecclesiastical History of the English People, St. Wilfrid, um, who claimed to be the first Englishman to introduce the rule of St. Benedict, St. Cadwalla, King of West Saxons, and for female saints, you have Melangle and St. Winifred, associated with the Irish and Welsh ethnic groups. And the Lindisfarne Gospels are written. So I suggest looking at that for the view of the Bible, like kind of how I mentioned in the 7th century is when the Bible was completed. So it's interesting to see how they were formed, what kind of styles, what kind of prints, pages, colors they were using. Saint Calfred with a version of the Vulgate 716. Um, so I'll come back to read this part, like what are major events. But first, let me introduce more of John V. So John V was the Patriarch of Jerusalem from the year 706, 735. During this period, the iconoclastic struggles under the Eastern Roman Emperor Leo III were happening. Iconoclastic means destruction of images or people who oppose images, specifically images that the church uses. Um, Leo the third was also called the Assyrian, um, and this was a time of persecution in Palestine and Syria under different Muslim rulers. This doesn't mean that every single one of them were difficult on the Christians. You'll see from the as I keep going, that some Muslim rulers were lenient or peaceful and not shedding blood in terms of relationship with the Christians. So John the Fifth. John was a monk who succeeded Anastasius II as Patriarch of Jerusalem in the year 706. He was a friend of John of Damascus and ordained him to the priesthood shortly after John of Damascus entered the monastery in Jerusalem to become a monk. Patriarch John also supported John of Damascus in his efforts against Emperor Leo and the iconoclasts, including writing a number of tracts against iconoclasm. During his patriarchate, John V had to contend with the fanatical Muslim ruler of Palestine, Caliph Omar II. Coming into power in the year 717, Omar II began a reign of persecutions against Christians that also changed the character of Palestine from Christian to Muslim. In addition to forbidding Christians to make wine and forcing them to convert to Islam, many Christians suffered martyrdom. John V reposed in the year 735 and was succeeded by John VI, although some scholars believe John V and VI are the same person. And so here in this, the Patriarch of Jerusalem, you'll see that it just acknowledges John V for this time period. And then after this person, we have Theodore. So Theodore of Jerusalem. So this is focusing on the Greek Orthodox Patriarchate, but I also want to clarify. Greek Orthodox doesn't really like the term doesn't really exist. What does exist is that for people who are not in the Roman Empire, so east of the Roman Empire, uh, they acknowledge the people, the bishops of this place, as being in union with Chalcedon, and therefore being in union with the Roman Empire that's in the east, and that's in today's terms called the Byzantine Empire, because the capital was changed away from Rome and into Byzantium, and when Emperor Constantine transferred his throne, and when he did that, he changed the name of the city of Byzantium to Constantinople. Um, it will continue to be called Constantinople for many centuries until the Turkish Muslims would change the term that they were more familiar was Constantiniye, and Constantiniye is basically a reference to the city of Constantine. And then in the 1930s is when the Republic of Turkey would officially change the name to Istanbul. Um, so basically, Istanbul or Constantinople, the Bishop of Jerusalem was associated with that bishop, the Archbishop of Constantinople. So that's what the Greek Orthodox means. It doesn't mean necessarily that they're Greek. It just means that they're in union with Rome in the sense of the Eastern Roman Empire, which was called the Byzantine Empire. Um, and so this Theodore, he saw during his time as bishop a severe persecution of the Christians and Jews in Palestine by the Muslim ruler Abdallah ibn Ali, who demanded extremely high taxes from Christians and placed harsh restrictions on them, forbidding nocturnal vigils, or this means services at night, confiscating sacred vessels, uh, basically things that the Christians considered holy. Could be cups, could be plates, and demanding removal of crosses from all the churches. Abdallah required Christians and Jews to bear distinctive markings. This was pretty interesting to me. In modern American high school education, you learn about Jews having distinctive markings, but I never really thought about Christians being forced by Muslims to have distinctive markings. As the leader of the Christians, the bishops bore the brunt of his harsh actions. These persecutions also forced many Christians to leave Palestine. So this is kind of a trend that I noticed. So let's say, for example, if you're a Christian in the year 69, there's probably, I'm going to guess, like 50% of the people who live in Palestine are Christians, and the other 50% are not. But they're in the year 150, between 150 and 250, there's a lot of persecutions against Christians. So that percentage drops from maybe 50% down to 30%, I would guess. And then in the fourth century, between the years 350 to 450, it rises again where there's more Christians. So I think after the apostles, it went from 50% to later 30%, and then from the fourth to fifth centuries back up to 50%. And then from the fifth to sixth centuries, I'm guessing it went up maybe as high as 70%, where the population was Christian in Palestine. But then after the year 630, so after the Muslim invasions, from let's say 630 to 730, which is my topic or the time period of this video. It's 706 to 730 something, 750. And so basically in the 8th century, it reduces again. So I think that's what it's implying here when it changes the social character, that the population of Christianity would rise and fall in different centuries, but in this century, in the 8th century, it would fall. Um, so that's the heritage, or the stats that Theodore is receiving or experiencing as he's the Bishop of Jerusalem. Also, during his episcopate, Theodorus joined with the patriarchs of Alexandria and Antioch in the condemnation of Cosmas, the bishop of Epiphanius, which is also called Hama, who had declared himself to be an iconoclast. So, what this means is that Orthodox bishops, especially those from Jerusalem, Alexandria, and Antioch, um, consider themselves iconodules, or continuing the tradition of having images in church and venerating them, whereas Constantinople was teeter tottering, and apparently this one of Epiphanius had also rejected the Orthodox faith. Theodorus died in 782 and was succeeded by Eusebius as patriarch. However, Eusebius himself reposed the same year, and that's probably why he's not listed here. So basically, after Theodorus acknowledged Elias the fifth. Um, so having read about these two, John the Fifth and Theodore, I'll read about Umar. So this is there's different Umars, but this one that I'm talking about is the one that ruled starting in the year 717, called the eighth caliph of the Umayyad Caliphate. So this one I wanted to point out in his reforms. Um, the most significant reform of this Umar was affecting the equality of Arabs and Mawali, who are non-Arab Muslims. This was mainly relevant to the troops in the Muslim army who had not been entitled to the same shares and spoils, lands, and salaries given to Arab soldiers. The policy also applied to Muslim society at large. Under previous Umayyad rulers, Arab Muslims had financial privileges over non-Arab Muslims. Non-Arab converts to Islam were still expected to pay the jizya, or a poll tax that they paid before becoming Muslims. Umar put into practice a new system that exempted all Muslims, regardless of their heritage, from the jizya tax. He also added some safeguards to the system to make sure that mass conversion to Islam would not cause the collapse of the finances of the Umayyad government. Under the new tax policy, converted Mawali would not pay the jizya, but upon conversion, their land would become the property of their villages and would thus remain liable to the full rate of a land tax, Karaj. This compensated for the loss of income due to the diminished jizya tax base. He issued an edict of taxation stating whosoever except Islam, whether Christian, Jew, or Zoroastrian, of those now subject to taxes and who joins himself to the body of the Muslims in their abode, forsaking the abode in which he was before, he shall have the same rights and duties as they have, and they are obligated to associate with him and to treat him as one of themselves. Um, Possibly to stave off potential blowback from opponents of the equalization measures, Umar expanded the Islamization drive that had been steadily strengthening under his Marwanid predecessors. The drive includes measures to distinguish Muslims from non Muslims and the inauguration of an Islamic iconoclasm. So I'll kind of stop here and then move on to previous Umar. So this is the first Umar. It's a different one from 100 years before, but this is called Umar's Assurance. So let me read that. Umar's assurance is an assurance of safety given by the Caliph Umar ibn al-Khattab to the people of Elia, the late Roman name for Jerusalem. Several versions of their assurance exist with different views of their authenticity. The traditional view ascribes it to Caliph Umar ibn al-Khattab and the time when Muslims captured Jerusalem around the year 638. The guarantees given to Christians regarding their churches and other properties make it one of the most important documents in the history of the city. The significance of the assurance is discussed by early Muslim historians such as al-Waqidi. The text of the document is included, abridged or in full, in works from the later 9th and 10th centuries. Opinions differ on the authenticity of the different versions of the assurance. Many historians have questioned the authenticity of the Christian versions of this pact and argue that such documents were forged by Christian scribes to secure the possessions of some religious sites. Some historians consider aspects of the version of Al-Tabari, who died between 786 and 809, to be authentic. For instance, Moses Gill, while discussing Al-Tabari's version, points out that the language of the covenant and its details appear authentic and reliable, and in keeping with what is known of Jerusalem at the time. The historical background: by 637, Muslim armies began to appear in the vicinity of Jerusalem. You can see more about this in my previous video between Patriarch Sophronius and Anastasius II. But I'll go over to the text itself. In the name of God, the merciful and compassionate, this is the assurance of the safety which the servant of God, Umar, the commander of the faithful, has given to the people of Jerusalem. He, Elia, Capitolina. He has given them an assurance of safety for themselves, for the property, their churches, their crosses, their sick and healthy of the city, and for all the rituals which belong to the religion. Their churches will not be inhabited by Muslims and will not be destroyed. Neither they, nor the land on which they stand, nor their cross, nor their property will be damaged. They will not be forcibly converted. The people of Jerusalem must pay the taxes like the people of other cities, and must expel the Byzantines and the robbers. Those of the people of Jerusalem who want to leave with the Byzantines, take their property, and abandon their churches and crosses will be safe until they reach their place of refuge. The villagers who had taken refuge in the city at the time of the conquest may remain in the city if they wish, but must pay taxes like the citizens. Those who wish may go with the Byzantines, the Romans, and those who wish may return to their families. Nothing is to be taken from them before their harvest is reaped. If they pay their taxes according to their obligations and the conditions laid out on this letter are under the covenant of God, are the responsibility of his prophet, of the Caliph, and of the faithful. Witnessed by the following five or six individuals. Um, so having read that, like I connected back to the efforts of John V and Theodore, in that they want to protect property because 100 years earlier, in 638, this was granted. It was written by a Muslim ruler, but Umar II wanted to confiscate, wanted to enforce higher taxes, wanted to force conversions. So, from a political standpoint, how does this Leo III, the Emperor of the Romans, stand to benefit during this 8th century or the beginning of the 8th century? So between 730 to 740, he's going to forbid the veneration of icons. Um, he's going to try to fight against the Bulgarians, fight against the Arabians. And in this particular case, the Arabians are totally fine with iconoclasm. So probably, I would guess, as a motivation, he wants to either destroy or get rid of icons in churches or public places, specifically Christian or religious iconography, in favor of himself or in favor of uh, secular or imperial sort of images. So I'll just fast forward to this policy. Uh, Leo's most striking legislative reforms dealt with religious matters, especially the icon breaking. After an apparently successful attempt to enforce the baptism of all Jews and Montanists, Montanists are Christian heretics, in the empire in 722, he issued a series of edicts against the veneration of images. Um, a revolt, sorry, I'll skip this one. I'll read the Eastern perspective later. I'm going to fast forward here to the Western. In the Italian peninsula, the defiant attitude of Popes Gregory II and later Gregory III on behalf of image veneration or icon veneration led to a fierce quarrel with the Emperor Leo III, with the Liber Pontificalis stating that Gregory II took up arms against the emperor as if against an enemy. In Rome, the population was more sympathetic to icon veneration, killing a pro-imperial duke and blinding another, while in Naples, iconoclasm, or destruction of images, was broadly well received. A conflict between pro-imperial and anti-imperial factions in the Exarchate of Ravenna, a very important city in Italy, that administrated communication and official power between Constantinople and Rome, led to the death of Exarch Paul. The struggle was accompanied by an armed outbreak in the Exarchate in the year 727, which Leo endeavored to subdue by means of a large fleet. The new Exarch Eutychius disembarked in Naples but could not enter Rome and assert his authority. This led to an unexpected alliance between Liutprand and Eutychius against Gregory, who, however, managed to convince the king, appealing to his piety, to return north and the exarch to put down a revolt in Etruria, led by the usurper Tiberius Patacius. In response to the promulgation of stronger iconoclastic decrees in the year 730, Gregory II and Gregory III summoned consuls in Rome to declare accursed or anathematize and remove from communion or excommunicate the iconoclast. This happened twice. Leo retaliated by making the aforementioned transferals in southern Italy and Illyricum. I think this is Albania, or yeah, right there, east of northeast of Italy, from the papal diocese to that of the Patriarch of Constantinople. So obviously, non-Christian scholars will give you their perspective on the analysis of Eli's iconoclasm. I want to give you the Christian perspective. Um, so now, before I read about Leo, I want to get some more information about heresies. So previously, like in the previous century, monophysitism, the single will, the single nature, the single energy, these heresies had been brought up by certain Christian heretics, and these ideas were officially condemned. Um, and as part of that seventh century, for the one will, one nature, one God, it's the same time period that Islam says, there's no other God but God, or um, the affirmation of one essence and one nature, which is relevant or common to Islam. So, from the eyes of Saint John of Damascus, he sees the Muslim religion as a Christian heresy. So, more heresies that come up in the year 660 at the Polysianists and Polysianism. Saint John wrote three treatises, and in one book listed errors uh, known about in his time period and previous ages. You can see more on that on the Fount of Knowledge in the book titled On Heresies. Other groups and their ideas, how they were challenging or combating against Christian orthodoxy, include the Pythagoreans or Peripatetics, Platonists, Stoics, Epicureans, Samaritans. And this Samaritan is different in that in this time period they denied the resurrection. They rejected the prophecies after Moses. They avoided contact with certain things, and they held the Gentiles in abomination. The Gorthenes, the Sabians, the Essenes, the Dostines. Some Jewish titles list scribes or lawyers with superstitions, Pharisees who introduced horoscope and extra asceticism. You can see more on that on Kabbalah. Sadducees, who were similar to the Samaritans but of a different priestly clan. Hentero Baptists, who demanded daily bathing for eternal life. Essenes rejected most prophets while maintaining Torah and a few prophets. Nazareans, who forbade eating meat or any animal. Herodians, who imputed Christ to Herod and treated him with such dignity. So, with that as a background, now we have iconoclasm in the 8th century. So, iconoclasm um, and destruction of religious items. This affected the West, which was understood as Eastern Europe, West Asia, or Constantinople, which is today Turkey, Syria, and Palestine. The source was the East, otherwise understood as Arabia. The iconoclastic tendencies were mostly instigated by the Muslim rulers or caliphates, and the harassment of those who held honor or high view of images affected Orthodox Christians in Northeast Africa, West Asia, and Central Asia, such as Iran and India. Even further east, the Church of the East and the Syriac churches also suffered persecution, not necessarily to icons specifically, but due to Emperor Wuzong of the Tang Dynasty in China banning foreign religions, including Christianity, specifically the Church of the East, sometimes referred to as Nestorian Christianity, in 845 AD. This action was part of the larger persecution, primarily targeting Buddhism and the Tibetan Empire, a powerful foreign religion at the time. The Tang government's reasons for persecuting foreign religions, including Christianity, stem from several factors: economic, political, and social. Western Europe was not affected by iconoclast tendencies as much because the politics and the social variance of the East did not influence them. But as we read with Leo the Third, there were some Italians or some people in Western Europe who were acceptable or agreeable to the destruction of images. Um, but it seems like it was coming more from the secular government or from non-Orthodox Christian people. So other um, things to consider. Megetians or Cassianists were a rigorous Christian sect in Muslim Spain in the late 8th century and early 9th centuries. Their writings are lost and are known primarily through the letters of their opponents. Archbishop Elipan of Toledo and Pope Adrian I noted for prevalence of adoptionism in the Spanish church. The Megetians were not adoptionists but were opposed to the Spanish church hierarchy, declaring absolute loyalty to Rome. They tended towards and may have been influenced by Donatism and the rigorous standards for priests. They preached separatism from Muslims and imposed dietary restrictions to uphold separation. They may have held unorthodox Trinitarian views. According to another source, at least three explanations for Cassiani have been advanced. They are named for Cassia Negre, the throne of Donatus. They are named after a place, probably a church dedicated either to Cassian of Tangier or Cassian of Imola. They are named after John Cassian on a corrupt account attributed to him, and they're reputed semi Pelagianism. I recommend speaking to an Orthodox spiritual father about Cassianism, East versus West. While the West largely followed Augustine, Eastern traditions like Hesychasm found resonance with Cassian's synergistic view, viewing him as an ascetic saint. Um, so that's like the background of heresies or Christian groups who are being anathematized or removed via excommunication or acknowledged as not part of the church. So that's one of the reasons why St. John of Damascus would write his book, De Heresibus, or On Heresies, out of the found knowledge. And he would also, in the same time period, write the Fide Orthodoxa, which is called, in English, Exposition on the Orthodox Faith. So, in light of many groups calling themselves Christians or trying to proclaim a one God or a single God, um, the Trinitarians or the Diophysites, those who confess two natures in Christ, were surrounded by multiple different groups in East and West, but the groups varied and they had different philosophies, different ideas, different values. So hopefully this chart helps give a background of what's going on. So Leo the Third isn't just fighting against Muslims; like he's also trying to stabilize a empire and make one single religion. And in his effort to do that, I think he forbade the veneration of icons to try to appease many people, or at least what he understood to be many people. Another thing I wanted to point out: while the Orthodox Christians in Jerusalem had the 60th John V and the 61st Theodore as true bishops canonically ordained in Jerusalem. In the same time period, you have the third, fourth, and fifth bishops of the Armenian diocese, Kevork and Gerdich Ioannis, and you have one, two, three, four, five, six, seven, maybe the eighth, ninth, and tenth bishops of Antioch, also stationed in Jerusalem. But in my opinion, this is uncanonical because um, different dioceses are not supposed to put ordained bishops in other people's dioceses. So even though they call themselves bishops of Jerusalem, whether the Jacobite Church or the Armenian Church, um, I have a tendency to think based on Umar, based on the Muslims, based on Leo the Third, that Christians in the east of the Roman Empire, such as Armenia and those in Syria that were more part of Persia, or part of the Umayyad Caliphate, uh, had a tendency that in promoting Miaphysitism, they wanted a one God with one nature, or Miaphysis, one nature, to be more familiar or more friendly with the Muslims, as opposed to the Diophysis, or the two natures, that is more familiar with the Romans or the Western from their point of view. So I think for political purposes, these Armenian and Syriac monks wanted to retain identity that was not unified with this, not unified with the Constantinople or the Byzantine Empire, because not only sometimes for political reasons they saw some things going wrong, but in terms of allegiances, they were dominated by Muslims. Armenia was influenced by Muslim rulers, as was Syria. Um, so John of Damascus, for example, was living in Syria, in Damascus, while it was being ruled by a Muslim ruler, and that's where he wrote his books, which defended icon veneration. Um, so I think the politics is a big influence why icon destruction was happening in the church, but not being promoted by Orthodox Christians, but being promoted by either those who were heretics, or those who had abandoned the church, or those who had a favor or an inclination to get rid of icons for the sake of being at peace or mitigate war with the Arabians or the Bulgarians, or um, any other kind of ethnic group or nation that didn't want Christian. Orthodox Christian presentations. So in my next video, I will continue with Elias V, the 62nd Archbishop of Jerusalem. And again, please like the video so it can continue to be promoted on YouTube or subscribe. Thank you for your time.